Hey Jojo, want to talk about TTRPGs and war games and just table games entirely? What? I didn't hear that. Are you a mute this week? I guess I'm talking to myself this week. So let's talk about something. Tabletop games have some rules that are universal. Rules that are almost never talked about, but are almost always recognized and understood. Weirdly enough, because of that, I don't really need to talk about them, right? Well, I'm going to. Why? Because I still haven't figured out how Vampire the Masquerade works, and that was originally on my list to review. Look, I'm trying to understand it. I get the basic ideas behind it, but something about the book just makes me not care anymore. You know what I mean? So, I suppose you could call this a list video, but I don't know if I'll actually put numbers on the screen or not. I'll be honest, I make editing choices as I'm stitching these files together, okay? What are the unspoken rules of any tabletop game? I should clarify, this isn't just RPGs or war games or anything in between. I'll do my best to specify if it needs to be, but most of these will apply to any and all. So, what's first on the list? Well, I've noticed on this website, formerly known as Twitter, is that there's an unfortunately huge portion of people who claim that your value as a fan to a franchise is based entirely upon how good you are at painting minis or how you enjoy the franchise. I want to point out that most franchises have multiple ways to enjoy them, whether it's Warhammers with the books, fan creations, collections, or games. D&D is similar, from video games to RPGs to the novels. Eberron has some great novels, really. Read City of Towers. And if you are someone who likes to paint models, like myself, don't go insulting people's paint jobs. Not everyone has time to paint their models. Not everyone has hands steady enough to be professional. And everyone needs to start somewhere. Hell, people are telling me I paint pretty well, but I don't think so. Oh, I'm trying to teach myself how to shade models now. I never understood that, but I've begun to realize it's less of shading and more like putting false wear on the metals. But whatever. Don't be a paint shamer. No, that's shit. You don't know why they haven't painted them or why they painted them the way they did. Next up, if you do use models in your RPG or play something like Warhammer or HeroScape or Battletech, always ask permission before touching another person's miniatures. Painted or not, as a Warhammer player, I know that those overpriced pieces of plastic coming from the UK can be fragile. So very fragile. I have a Necron's army. One wrong look and my Silent King's spindly legs will snap. But this plastic used on these models are surprisingly common quality. But if they're pre-assembled, you don't really need to worry as much. Notice WizKids models are pretty sturdy, but they can still break. A custom model from Hero Forge are also pretty strong, but my favorite is now but Feet because he's snapped so many times. It's just, I gave up fixing Medic. And if the model in question is painted, I can see a few reasons. Are you sweaty? Are your hands dirty? Or maybe the paint on the model is peeling and the guy who owns it doesn't want to risk it. There's 1,001 reasons for someone may ask you not to touch their models, so always ask beforehand. Third rule is pretty simple. If you want to touch a person's model, stay clean. Weirdly enough, this applies not just to your hands, but to your personal hygiene as well. Wash up, deodorant, brush your teeth, mouthwash doesn't hurt either. I know I stink if I don't shower. Hell, I have to shave multiple times a day like so many men. Every Wednesday before I drive an hour to go to a Pathfinder or Warhammer game, depending on the week, I make sure I shower, shave, put on deodorant, then brush my teeth. Make sure all my shit is in my car, just in case there's another situation of last minute plan changes. And again, if you do decide to touch a guy's models, painted or not, please clean your hands first. If model isn't painted, Cheeto dust or even the salt can stick to the plastic, messing with future paint jobs. If it is painted, that stuff can, again, stick to the paint and be impossible to remove. Don't be an asshole, keep yourself clean. Keep your stink at home. Rule 4, if you're going to use someone's house to play a game and you're a guest, ask if they want you to bring snacks. This is applied to more as well. It's usually assumed that the host will provide snacks, but it's just polite to try and lift some of the weight off of them. If you bring or make snacks or get snacks for everyone, it's obviously assumed that you need to understand everyone's dietary needs or preferences. I'm diabetic myself, so I have to avoid sugar and carbs and such. Do I? No, I love Sour Patch Kids. When I'm asked to bring snacks or I offer myself, I always double check if there's any allergies for anyone or specific likes and dislikes. For example, I'm the only one in any of my friend groups that likes pineapple on pizza, so when I'm asked to get pizza or offer it, I won't get that. I'll get what they want, which is usually like just some simple pepperoni or cheese. I'll always ask those sort of things of what people want. That's the least I can do. It's usually something simple, so no issue there. What about Rule 5? Well, this will apply mostly to competitive games like Warhammer or whatever have you. Know any house rules or home rules that your table will play by. This does come up in normal RPGs too. I have a rule I picked up from my GM. I don't use floor dice. My Wednesday group, I have stated it so many times, probably because I say it every time I drop a die. The Warhammer group I play with sometimes also has a few rules. My friend has a cock die rule. If a die lands on an angle of something, no matter how slight, you re-roll it. I honestly don't care for this rule, but I accept it at this point. Some groups' rules are because they're competitive groups. A lot of the shop I play, or I go to, play in competitive matches for Warhammer. I actually got my Knight Dominus because one guy won it and didn't want it. Halfway to completing that army because of it. I've also got other rules as well. For me, if you attack from stealth in a TTRPG and you hit, you auto-crit. Why? Because it's fun and it rewards making stealth builds for things not rogues. I've also got a few other ones, but this ties into another rule of tabletops. 6. If you run a game, make sure any sort of homebrew rules are spoken of before making characters. Sometimes homebrew rules will affect what one makes. My stealth rule honestly gives everyone a reason to make a stealth build. Hell, if you change flanking for 5th edition, it might make the rogue absolutely impossible to play. So do make sure your group knows your rules. Many changes to the game can be made to make it better or worse. But if you do make changes, make sure your group knows. So, Rule 7. This is one that doesn't really need to be said, but do your best to be respectful. There's a few things with certain games that honestly make me uncomfortable. Especially one spell from 3.5 D&D that has been renamed to Alter Memory in every following game, including Pathfinder and 5th edition. No, I will not name the spell. The name alone will lock my channel. No, I won't name it anywhere for the exact same reason. But everyone has limits. That subject is just general to my limit. If you find the spell, you'll understand. Understand those limits, and is a big part of being respectful. Along with several other things, but this applies both ways. My players have to be respectful to me too. I spend each week doing several things. I plan a game, prepare a story, design encounters, plan arenas, write these scripts, record audio, edit videos, and still go to my casual job 3 days a week. And that's not even including the books I write for Saloon and the One World games I'm designing. So, my time is strewn very thin. I just ask my 2-player groups to respect that time I take to do this. Does that happen? Well, for one game, yeah. For the second, it's questionable, but I'll admit I'm pretty lenient with this respect thing because everyone has their own lives. At least 3 of my players across both groups are students. One's in the Air Force, one's my business partner, one's a trucker, and she's working on her own game for us to sell at Conqueror Creations. One's a welder. One of the students is also a manager of a restaurant, though he might just be manager in duty, not in title. Not 100% sure. I know for those students, they should focus on education first. I always say that. The Air Force guy can't just middle finger his job, or else he could spend time in a prison. My business partner is pretty reliable to show up. Trucker's in a constant state of questionable availability. Who knows where she'll be that week? Of course, in some people, in some groups, I just don't hear shit from them and never know when they're going to show up. Of course, this respect goes back to them. I need to respect each and every one of them, whether it's a subject they'd rather not touch, or something they'd rather not happen, or something they'd rather not talk about with life. I need to give them the same respect that I expect from them. This whole thing leads to my last rule. Rule 8. Don't be afraid to speak. A lot of issues can be solved if you just talk to someone in private. I make sure any new player in any of my groups understands this. They'll have limits I don't know in the first session. And I'll have limits they won't know until it's brought up. Now, there's obviously more rules. Some of these are fairly obvious, some of which need to be nailed into your brains. But all these rules will go in varying levels of importance, depending on your own group. But that's enough of my rules for tabletop games. Got anything to say, Jojo?
No.
You know what? Shove off.